I mean, I feel like whenever Novak enters any tournament for that matter, or a major, he'll be...
What if the most unpredictable Grand Slam in years is happening right now, and even Roger Federer isn't sure who's going to win it? Walk into this year's U.S. Open, and you'll feel it immediately. Nothing is settled. Jannik Sinner is out with a knee injury before the tournament even really gets going. Carlos Alcaraz is stepping back onto the court after nearly 6 months away from competition. Alexander Zverev, fresh off one of the best summers of his career, has crashed out early twice already during this U.S. Open swing. And Novak Djokovic, the man everyone still measures the field against, looked physically shaky in his last outing in Cincinnati. Add in a wave of young players pushing hard for their breakthrough, and you get a draw that nobody can confidently call. So, when Roger Federer sat down for a press conference at Flushing Meadows, of course the first question was about Djokovic. Could he really pull off major title number 25? Federer didn't hesitate. He said that whenever Novak shows up to a tournament, he's a threat, full stop. Not because of hype, but because of history. Federer pointed out that he's watched Djokovic do it again and again on every surface, on every big stage, at the highest level there is. And he added something interesting. He believes Djokovic keeps playing precisely because he still believes he can win. That, Federer said, is probably the real reason he hasn't walked away yet. Then the conversation shifted to Federer himself and what life actually looks like on the other side of retirement. Asked if he misses competing, his answer was refreshingly honest. Not really. He doesn't miss putting his body through that kind of grind, the defending, the scrapping, the grueling matches. But he's still hitting balls regularly because he's learned that once you stop chasing that competitive purpose, weeks can go by without picking up a racket at all. These days, it's less about training for a tournament and more about having a reason to get back on court. Sometimes that reason is his kids who are now old enough to rally with him. Sometimes it's an exhibition or a doubles match. He also talked about spending real time in the gym, working out with his wife and friends, a different kind of physical outlet, but nothing that replaces actually playing. From there, a reporter brought up something surprisingly specific. The possibility that this could be the first calendar year in tennis history without a single one-handed backhand player reaching a Grand Slam semifinal. Federer's reaction said it all, half amused, half genuinely thoughtful. He admitted he didn't have a clean answer, joking that he'd better go hit with Lorenzo Musetti that afternoon and pass on whatever wisdom he could. But then he got into the real explanation. Growing up, almost all of his coaches played one-handed backhand themselves, and he thinks that lineage matters. Kids tend to mirror the strokes of the people teaching them. Now, most coaches use two hands, and two hands is simply easier to teach quickly. He talked about one of his own children switching from a two-handed backhand to a one-hander, and how visibly difficult that transition has been. Technically sound in theory, but slow and frustrating in practice, and modern tennis doesn't reward patience like that anymore. He didn't stop there. Federer laid out a whole chain of reasons the one-hander has faded: better racket and string technology, slower balls and courts, and a massive shift in how the game is trained. He estimated that in his own era, practice was split roughly 50-50 between baseline play and net game. Before his time, it may have leaned even more toward the net. Now, he said it's almost entirely baseline, maybe 90%. That shift favors the two-handed backhand, especially with players sliding into open stance shots the way Djokovic and Nadal made famous, turning what used to be a defensive weakness into a strength. He even touched on the physical side, the whispers about wrist injuries tied to two-handed backhands, but doubted that would ever be enough to reverse the trend. Still, he ended on a hopeful note, saying he isn't ready to accept that the one-hander is finished for good. The final question turned toward something bigger than technique: representation in tennis. With Frances Tiafoe and Arthur Fils having just met in a Masters 1000 final, both black players competing at that level, Federer was asked what that moment means for the sport's future. He called it meaningful, even calling it a kind of beacon for people who don't always see themselves reflected at the top of the game. He acknowledged that tennis has historically leaned heavily European and American, and said he'd genuinely love to see stronger representation grow out of Africa, Asia, and South America. He recognized the tension in having such a global tour. Players can't be everywhere at once, but praised the sport for continuing to push in that direction. Seeing a moment like Tiafoe versus Fils happen not in an early round, but in an actual final felt to him like real progress and something he hopes becomes far more common at the sport's biggest events going forward. Between an uncertain draw, a legend still shaping the game from the sidelines, and bigger conversations about who tennis is really for, this U.S. Open is proving to be about a lot more than just who lifts the trophy.